Hello and welcome back to the stars, everybody. Welcome back to Starfield, where today we're going to be taking a look at the Negotiator, the second grenade launcher, and one of only two grenade launchers in the game, if you're not counting other weapons that can be converted into grenade launchers. And this one is the most grenade launcher looking out of the grenade launcher weapons. This definitely looks like an M32 rotary grenade launcher. It's been in all sorts of other games. It is decked out a little bit differently, and this is probably going to be one of the later heavy weapons that you find, because these don't show up super early on. So for the base stats of the Negotiator, this one does a whopping 140 damage per shot, which is very high, as you would kind of hope for a grenade launcher. It does a lot of damage. It does have a damage drop off, just like every sort of grenade type weapon in these sort of games, where at the absolute center of the grenade launcher is going to do the most damage, and then it's going to do less damage the further away you get from the explosion. This is one of only two weapons that actually fires the 40mm XPL round. It's only this and the Bridger, which we talked about earlier. That is a big lever action grenade launcher, which is really cool. So it only has that in competition, at least in terms of ammo. However, the 40mm grenade launcher ammo is generally the most expensive ammo and the rarest ammo, besides maybe 45 ACP in the game. Why those two are the ones, I don't know, but it is very difficult to find the grenades for this. This one holds 10 rounds in it by default, which is quite high. That's really nice, as well as this does reload the entire magazine all at once, so it does have a fairly quick reload, at least compared to the Bridger, where you have to load each round in one at a time. This one has a 12 rate of fire, so fairly slow, but you don't need to be firing a grenade launcher that fast a lot of the time. This has 48 meters of effective range, weirdly enough. I don't know why they didn't just round that up to 50, but 48 meters is really good. That's further than most rifles, or at least further than some rifles. This one has decent accuracy, although it is a grenade launcher, so accuracy doesn't matter that much, especially if you're using your jetpack to hover up above something and just drop grenades down on top of it. It just needs to hit in the general area and you'll be fine. And then this thing weighs a ton. This thing weighs 11 weight. So it is one of the heftiest weapons in the entire game, probably one of the heaviest, or at least in the top 5 or 10 most heavy weapons, and it gets even heavier from there once you start putting mods on this thing. So if you get a titanium build, or if you have weapon holsters on your suit, that can really help with this. For the general pros of the Negotiator, this one does do high damage and it has good crowd control because it is a grenade launcher, so it fits that role really well. It's got fairly fast follow-up shots, and it is an explosive weapon, so you don't need to be that accurate with it. It doesn't really matter. For the general cons of this weapon, though, is that it's very heavy. It's going to weigh you down quite a bit. Luckily, ammo doesn't weigh anything in this game, so you're not going to be too heavy thanks to the ammo. If there is ever a survival mod or survival installed into Starfield, I don't think that the grenade launchers are going to be things that you want to be picking up and carrying around. I think it's going to be very much a Fallout New Vegas situation where you tend to avoid weapons like this. Whenever I play hardcore on that game, I basically never pick up things like Fat Man or mini nukes because they're just way too heavy for me. Same thing goes with like missile launchers and missiles. And the other major con to this is that it has very rare ammo. We talked about that just a second ago, but yeah, the 40mm grenades are extremely hard to find. They're very expensive when you do find them, and not very many merchants actually carry them. When they do carry them, they usually have less than 20 on them. So if you plan on doing just a grenade launcher only run, you better be okay with resetting and going back to different areas so that you can potentially buy more and more ammo for this. Good news is, though, you don't necessarily need that much ammo to usually end a fight. You're not going to be spamming this out at everything, at least for a long period of time, unless there is just a massive amount of enemies. But most of the time, usually 1 or 2 shots is going to put something down, or it's going to damage it enough so you can push up on it with other weapons. On my heavy weapons tier list, I believe I put the Negotiator up into A tier, and I'd probably keep it in A tier. It is really good so long as you have ammo. Ammo is the main concern here. If you don't have ammo for it, it's not going to be that good, but assuming you have a decent amount of shots for this, then it's going to be really nice, especially for just flushing enemies out of cover, taking enemies out when they're behind cover, or just dealing very high damage to large groups of condensed enemies. It can be really good for any of those. If you don't have ammo, then you're probably not going to be using this very often, and if you're like me, you're probably not even going to carry it on your person. You're just going to keep it on your ship. It can be really good for a heavy weapons only run, though. So let's talk about a modded version and where I'd put that on the tier list, because this one does have some interesting mods. So starting out the front, we've got a barrel, and for a barrel you can either go with a long barrel or a stabilizing barrel. Both of these are pretty good. It totally depends on what you want. I put a long barrel on mine, but the stabilizing barrel is also really good. You just get better range, better recoil reduction, and better accuracy with this, although again, you don't need to be that accurate with the grenade launcher. The recoil also doesn't really matter with how slow it shoots anyway, so you're not going to be spamming this really quick to where the recoil can really build up. The extra range is mostly the big seller here, and it just gets you more stats overall, so I would say pick that one. For a laser, put on the recon laser. It's better than the regular laser. We've talked about this in basically every video. Recon laser marks out targets, and you just get better stats than a standard laser. Then for optics, this is a weapon that can have a scope. It can have a short scope on it, or a recon sight, or you can use the iron sights. I would say that the short scope is the best option here, because if you do put a scope on this and you get the sniper perk, it actually does count towards this, where you get more damage when ADSing with this. And the short scope doesn't really matter that much for a grenade launcher. It doesn't zoom in very much, so even inside of buildings, you can still usually get away with using the scope if you want to get that little bit of extra damage. It's not always necessary though. If you feel like you're doing more than enough damage to anything, then the reflex sight or the iron sights are also perfectly fine. Pick whichever one you would like. Then for a grip and stock, I would recommend the tactical stock. The stabilizing stock's pretty good though too. Stabilizing makes it so it's even better in terms of accuracy. Tactical stock reduces weight and also makes it better in terms of accuracy, so it's your call, whichever one you would like. Then for a magazine and battery, this one's kind of odd because this one only has technically 2 types of ammo. It has the standard ammunition, which it can always shoot, and it has the hornet nest rounds, which are like cluster bombs. You fire it out, it goes so far, it goes whatever the maximum range of your gun is, and then it will explode out and throw a bunch of shrapnel towards the ground. This can do a lot of damage indoors and inside the range that you're fighting at, but I do find it very awkward with this weapon. It also just isn't as strong. If you want to take Hornet's Nest, I would say that taking the double barrel with Hornet's Nest rounds is going to be your best option, and the grenade launchers really don't benefit from this as much. The Bridger, weirdly enough, has the Tesla pylons, which this one doesn't, and I kind of wish it did, so I usually keep just standard ammunition in this. However, if you want to take Hornet's Nest rounds, you can. They are pretty dangerous for yourself, though, because they will explode at any distance. The grenades will too, but the grenades seem to do less damage to you at close range for whatever reason. I'm not sure if this triggers similar to how it does in Fallout 4, where you can take multiple explosions in quick succession, and that can just kill you. I just found it that I was dealing more damage to myself with the Hornet rounds than with the standard rounds, but I honestly like the standard rounds a little bit better, because sometimes there is enemies outside of the range that I want to be shooting at, and I don't want to try to lob this above something so that it can throw down shrapnel upon them. It's not super consistent at all. And then for an internal, we only have one option here, which is a hair trigger. Throw that one on because you get a faster rate of fire. You don't need a faster rate of fire with the Negotiator whatsoever, but it's kind of nice to have. So if you like that, cool. If you don't, also cool. If you don't have the resources or the levels, you don't need it. Don't worry about it. The base Negotiator is actually pretty good. And with all these mods on here, I actually wouldn't move the Negotiator up or down. I would still keep it into A tier. It's kind of cool to have some of the mods that it can have on there. The big one I would say is like the scope. But outside of that, nothing else really feels all that necessary on the Negotiator. It doesn't feel that much different with anything else on it. I guess technically Hornet's Nest does feel different, but not necessarily different in a stronger or a weaker way, just in a different way that you want to play it, where you want to be using it close to medium range, and there is no long range with it anymore. So let's talk about the unique version next, which is called the Reckless Bombardment. The Reckless Bombardment you can actually buy at the very end of the UC Vanguard quest, or about 3/4 the way through it, where you buy it from the guy in Mars. So after you've already gone through most of the quest and you head back to Mars, then you can buy it from the guy there. He also sells the unique nail gun. That's called the Vampire's Gift, I believe, or the Vampire's Curse. I don't remember exactly what it was called. He sells this, and he sells the Reckless Bombardment. Reckless Bombardment does have some mods on it, and it does have one unique effect. It's also going to cost you a lot of money because Negotiators are very expensive, so keep that in mind. This one has a stabilizing barrel, a recon laser, a reflex sight, a tactical stock, and Hornet's Nest already loaded into the weapon, which if you want to try out Hornet's Nest rounds and you think that they're superior to the standard rounds, you could actually just buy this weapon, and that would be a really good option for you, because this one actually has some really good mods on it. The only thing I would switch off would be taking the reflex sight off and putting the short scope on there so I get more damage thanks to sniper. Its one unique effect is crippling, which is actually really nice for a grenade launcher, although you could argue that it's not super necessary, because this makes so you get 30% more damage on the next attack after you hit limbs. Since this one has the Hornet rounds out and it's firing just cluster bombs, you're gonna trigger this every time that you hit an enemy after the first shot. So it does trigger very, very often, and it is quite good with this particular weapon. So that brings us to, should you use the Negotiator? And if you're using a heavy weapons build, absolutely. If you're not, then maybe. It depends. If you already have access to the double barrel with Hornet's Nest rounds, I would say probably not, because that's just a better grenade launcher overall for the amount of ammo that you can pick up for it, and it's just super available. Whereas the Negotiator and the Bridger, the ammo is just so scarce. You have to stock up for it, or you have to buy it, or you have to hoard a bunch of the ammo for it so that you can actually get enough of it to really make a difference. But this weapon can be useful for either finishing off a fight or starting off a fight. Lobbing grenades into a crowd is a pretty good way to kick off a fight, or it's a pretty good way to end the fight. If enemies are all cowering behind hidden walls or surfaces or whatever it is, you can just kind of lob shots near them and you'll likely clear them out. So tell me your thoughts on the Negotiator down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. How do you enjoy this weapon? I think it looks really cool, even though it's a little bit weird and blocky and has extra stuff on there. I do like it a lot. It is pretty satisfying to use, and it's really fun just to be lobbing into crowds of enemies. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you guys so very much for watching it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.